Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. We're going to cover all 30 NBA teams in today's video as we discuss how much cap space they could potentially have this offseason. Of course, this is a video for the basketball sickos to best understand what could happen leading up to especially NBA free agency. Now, of course, the new CBA does impact more than just free agency from a salary standpoint. You also look at trades and exceptions. All of the different stuff is really affected by cap space. So we're going to try and cover all of that in today's video. If you do enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content. And let's jump into the salary figures first, just so everyone has a good bearing on what the numbers look like this year. The salary cap is at $154.6 million. That is a substantial growth from the year prior, a 10% leap. In fact, going from $140 million up to $154 million. That is a $14 million jump, a very significant cap spike for sure this season. And it's a testament to how well the NBA is doing financially, even with all the people freaking out about viewership, this, that, and the other thing. The TV deal is already agreed upon. The league's making a ton of money. They're going to continue making a ton of money. The NBA is in a great spot. I really don't understand why people worry so much about it. It's doing tremendously well as a product. The luxury tax is $33.3 million more than the salary cap this upcoming year at $187.9 million. That is, of course, a record luxury tax line, a huge number, one that will actually help some teams be able to avoid the tax this year. The first apron at $195.9 million, $8 million more than the luxury tax, remember. And that number, of course, the aprons are where things start to get scary. The second apron is at $207.8 million. There are a few teams already dangerously close to that and honestly already in that apron threshold. So that's pretty scary. And then also some of the mid-level exception numbers that I thought were important to share here at the beginning of this video. The standard mid-level this year with the cap jumping has gone up quite a bit at $14.104 million. It's a very, very good number for a mid-level exception. The taxpayer mid-level, just a hair below $6 million at $5.685 million. Pretty solid number, I think. And then that room mid-level exception is a little bit under $9 million at $8.781 million. Now that you're caught up on all of the salary cap figures you need to know for this upcoming season, let's jump into some teams that have potential real cap space. The Brooklyn Nets are the significant headliner here. A maximum of $90.59 million. They have a ton of open roster spots and a ton of money to play with. I think Sean Marks is really in the driver's seat this offseason, has 4 first-round picks, a very high second-round pick at number 36 in this year's draft, and ample cap space to boot. Now, this does come with some cap holds involved. It's very unlikely that Brooklyn actually operates with $91 million in cap space. They have a $28 million cap hold on D'Angelo Russell. Now, if they do keep D'Angelo Russell, he will make significantly less than $28 million. And they also have a cap hold on Cam Thomas, who I think they're going to be able to get back at a relatively team-friendly number for his talent level. So I think all things considered, Brooklyn is more likely to operate with around $40 to $50 million of actual cap space. Now, I do have their projected maximums listed here because I do think it's important to understand, like, hey, if this team renounces all of their cap holds, if they get rid of these guys, if they make this kind of move, what kind of money could they have? Brooklyn's really the only team with max cap space possible this offseason. They might not even operate with it. They might just try and retain most of their current core players. We'll see what they do, but they have a lot of flexibility. Could trade Nick Claxton, could trade Cam Johnson. Maybe if they find a deal that they like there, they open up even more money. They are one of the teams to watch for in restricted free agency battles, like a Josh Giddey, like a Jonathan Kuminga. And the Bulls, they have a maximum of $19 million in projected cap space this offseason. But it's very unlikely that they actually operate with that cap space because Josh Giddey, a restricted free agent this offseason, is due for a big payday. His cap hold is a little bit over $25 million. And then they also have Trey Jones, who his cap hold is north of $17 million. Now, I do think Trey Jones will get significantly less than that number, but I do think Josh Giddey will actually get a little bit more than his cap hold number. I'm kind of expecting 4 years, $120 million. Loosely for Josh Giddey, he'll be anywhere from that $26 to $32 million range annually, if I had to guess, this upcoming offseason with his negotiations. So Chicago's probably not going to operate with cap space. I don't believe Detroit will either. They have some significant cap holds on Tim Hardaway Jr., almost $25 million for his cap hold. Dennis Schroeder, who is just a hair below $17 million, and Malik Beasley's cap hold is actually at $7.2 million. I do think Hardaway and Schroeder will both make less than their cap holds. Schroeder, I do think, will stay with Detroit, as will Malik Beasley. I think anything like 2 years 20, 2 years 24 for Dennis Schroeder is fair. And then Beasley, I could see looking to sign a 2 or 3 year deal to stay in Detroit. I feel like he really found a home there. Tim Hardaway Jr., not sure if he's going to stay in Detroit or not. Probably would bet against it, but I do think he will ultimately sign somewhere for around $5 to $6 million. So Detroit, even if they don't keep Hardaway Jr., they still have the cap holds on Schroeder and Beasley, and if they do plan on keeping them like I expect, they won't be able to really operate with cap space. And then Memphis, another team with possible cap space after the Desmond Bane trade, but the cap holds of Luke Kennard, who they might just flat out renounce, and the cap hold of Santi Aldama, who will probably make more than that cap hold, probably limits what Memphis is actually going to be able to do this offseason when it comes to working in free agency with legitimate cap space. Now, there's always sign and trades. There's other mechanisms to sign free agents. These teams are very well positioned with that because they have a bunch of space between them and the tax and the aprons and everything. So these teams, while yes, 3 of the 4 I talked about probably won't operate with real cap space, the amount of space they have right now between the tax and the aprons for them and their current salary allocated is still an advantage going into this offseason. Now we get into 4 teams with potential cap space. The San Antonio Spurs have potentially $11 million in space. The Hawks have about $7.5 million. The Hornets have about $3.25 million. And the Jazz have a little over $2 million in potential space. And you might be wondering, okay, why do you have these 4 teams on a different graphic than the previous 4, even though they have, avenues to potential cap space? This is not very functional cap space. And the reason I say that, this dollar figure is less than the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. Remember that $14.105 million mark. Now, all of the teams we've talked about up to this point do have access to that NTMLE as well. So they could go out and use it, try and sign somebody in free agency with cap space and then also use that non-tax mid-level. Or they could just flat out keep all of their cap hold guys and then use the non-tax mid-level to add to their roster. So they do have flexibility options here this offseason. But San Antonio, Atlanta, Charlotte, and Utah, even though they have avenues to actual cap space where they're below the cap number, it doesn't mean that they're going to really be able to utilize that in an effective manner. So don't expect San Antonio, don't expect Atlanta, don't expect Charlotte, don't expect Utah to be really active in free agency. Now, the Spurs could be a team to watch for Naz Reid. We'll see what happens with Naz this offseason, but I think the most likely outcome is he stays in Minnesota. Now, one of the best free agents, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, someone who I think could have real value around the league. He's a player who I would love for Atlanta. I would like him a lot for San Antonio as well. So these teams still are in position if they scrape together their money right, try and work out a sign and trade. They have avenues to adding to their team. But this is the cap space picture for them, and with the numbers being less than the non-tax mid-level, it's not the most functional real use of cap space this offseason. Maybe would be best used acquiring a small contract via trade instead. When it comes to teams that are over the cap but below the aprons, there are a lot of different teams in this category, specifically starting with the Dallas Mavericks, a team that right now is just barely below the aprons, but with Cooper Flagg's contract coming up here, and of course on his rookie deal starting at over $13 million, the Mavericks are going to be a team that is dangerously approaching and maybe even surpassing the aprons. So Dallas is a team that I do think should look to probably try and finagle their roster a little bit, add a point guard, and dump some salary along the way. Now, important to note, these teams, if you're below the aprons, you do have access, assuming you're below the tax as well, to the standard mid-level, that $14.104 million mark, and the biannual exception number at $5.134 million this offseason. So a couple of ways to sign players to contracts. Even though you're over the cap, you can sign them to contracts greater than the minimum. So keep that in mind for all of these teams. Golden State, they of course have Kuminga's restricted free agency ahead. That could be a really nice sign and trade asset to work with. Indiana's biggest prerogative is going to be focusing on keeping Miles Turner, I would have to presume. The Clippers actually have quite a bit of room, and with how much Steve Ballmer has been willing to spend, I actually think they kind of navigated their cap table really well with this new era, this new CBA, which has been very punitive for teams and will be long-term. The Clippers getting out of the Paul George business at the time they did worked out really well for them, and they were able to supplement the roster with solid role players. Derrick Jones Jr., Chris Dunn are the two that come to mind immediately. That worked out great for the Clippers this past season. The Lakers, another team that's going to be extremely active this offseason. I do think if you're looking at that, mid-level exception, if they're able to split that up, they just got new ownership that's probably going to be willing to spend. Someone like Clint Capella could get a decent fraction of that mid-level and could be a starting center for them potentially next season. So the Lakers definitely will be active in free agency. I think Clint Capella will likely land with the Lakers, but they'll be looking over a variety of big man options, of course. Miami, another team that has been in the news, of course, linked to Kevin Durant a ton. At the time I'm recording this, there's been no Durant trade. We'll see what happens. But the Heat can go out in free agency and spend a bit with either the mid-level or the biannual if they want to do so. Milwaukee, this is one of the teams that could get back close to the aprons, depending on what Brook Lopez's number looks like, depending on what Kevin Porter Jr.'s number looks like this offseason. The Bucks, if they do try to run him back, retain some of their core players, will have some challenges to overcome financially with that, especially if they're retaining Giannis Antetokounmpo and trying to stay competitive. There's definitely a lot of options, but Milwaukee's one of the teams that I am watching very closely this offseason. Minnesota is a team that could theoretically get below the aprons, but very likely will end up back in them. Now, they do have Julius Randle's player option at $30.9 million. I think he could opt into it. We'll see what happens. I think that's a tricky situation this offseason. They will look to keep Naz Reid. That, of course, is going to be a big ticket item for them. And then Nickeil Alexander-Walker will enter free agency, more than likely. So Minnesota is going to lose some of their talent. They're going to try really hard and pay to keep a majority of their core pieces, like Naz, like Julius Randle. Minnesota's in a tricky spot. There's a reason they have an asterisk there by their name, because they're very likely going to end up as an over-the-apron team. But depending on what happens with some of their free agents, they could actually dip below the aprons because of their spending. And of course, there's also the Rudy Gobert trade possibilities with Durant. There's a lot of rumors right now around Minnesota. Not sure what's going to happen, but they are a salary team that very likely ends up in the aprons, but could be below them and just flat out over the cap instead. New Orleans has historically never paid the luxury tax. They never will under this current ownership. And I think with their current moves, the fact that they traded away Brandon Ingram with the Trey Murphy extension kicking in this offseason, it's more of the same for New Orleans. Oklahoma City, very well positioned cap table wise. Their cap table looks tremendous. Now, they haven't given the long-term extensions yet off those rookie deals to Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. Those are coming up rather quickly. That will change how that cap table looks pretty significantly, but all things considered here for the Thunder, their cap table still looks beautiful. Philadelphia, big cap table. Obviously, a lot of money committed to their top three of their roster. Very likely they could end up in the first apron threshold. Portland, a team here that is, I think, pretty well positioned. They have a lot of money already on their books, but it's for, 12, 13 players already on their roster. They have a couple restricted free agents this offseason, one of them being Jabari Walker. They have a Matisse Thybulle player option that he'll opt into, but the Blazers are still pretty well positioned and have a little bit of flexibility to save some money as well. Sacramento, not sure if I love the direction of their team. They have a lot of money committed, but they are still below the apron, so that's at least a silver lining. Toronto, a team that, again, is getting really dangerously close to the aprons. One of the big advantages for them right now is they have a lot of rotation players on rookie deals. You look at Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter. They have some pieces who long-term are going to be core pieces for them moving forward that are on cheaper deals, but their starting five is one of the most expensive in the league. And if it wasn't for the cap escalation, they would be dangerously into the apron. So the cap escalation helped them a lot. Washington, of course, a rebuilding team, they have some money to work with this offseason. So some first apron teams here now. Denver, Houston, New York, and Orlando. And these are teams that are over that first apron threshold at almost $196 million. Now they do have access to the taxpayer mid-level exception, but if they use it, they become hard capped at the second apron. So a team like New York, who's about $8 or $9 million away from that second apron number, if they use that near $6 million taxpayer mid-level, they get dangerously close to hard capping themselves and really limiting all of their flexibility for the remainder of the season and the remainder of the fiscal year in the NBA. So with that in mind, I'm not sure if New York's actually going to go out and use that taxpayer mid-level, but it could be a really great tool for them to add talent to their roster. Remember last year, Denver did so with Dario Saric. That contract did not work out. He has a player option for this year that he'll opt into. Houston, I think another team that Tillman Fertitta is going to want to spend. The Rockets are in a great spot. They have a lot of talent. They might make a big Kevin Durant trade. Not sure if they're going to actually commit to a taxpayer mid-level because they have so much depth already on the roster and some young guys who didn't even get opportunities to play. But the Rockets are definitely a team that if they want to push their chips in even a little bit further, maybe if they send out a bunch of depth in a big trade this offseason, maybe they could look to replenish a little bit of that. And Orlando, they definitely will not be using the taxpayer mid-level. They are dangerously close to the second apron. In fact, had to get out from the Gary Harris and Corey Joseph contracts just to make the deal even work in the Desmond Bane trade. And with that, I think, people continue to overlook the long-term financial strain Orlando's going to be under. Everyone's viewing it under the short-term lens of being able to make this trade work this year before Paolo Banchero's rookie extension kicks in. He's going to sign an extension this offseason. He's entering the final year of his rookie contract. I think Orlando made a real mistake with how much salary they have committed to this core four. I think they're going to be really good. They're going to win over 50 games this next year, maybe even 55. They're going to be an awesome team. They're going to be really competitive. But they better be ready to spend a lot of money and lose all of their flexibility because they don't have draft picks now really to work with from a trade perspective. And they also are going to be extremely lacking in a variety of other areas on their roster and from a fiscal financial perspective. So they're not going to have a lot of flexibility in any of those regards. So Orlando, even though I think Desmond Bane's a tremendous fit, made their team a whole lot better. They're going to be maybe even a conference finalist this upcoming season with how good their team is. They're just going to have real long-term implications with that spending. So I'm pretty concerned about Orlando. I think for the most part, everyone swept it under the rug and overlooked a lot of the financial burden that's going to play out for the Magic. But this offseason is the beginning of that, where they're not going to be able to use the taxpayer mid-level, and they're committed already as a first apron team, and without waiving Gary Harris and declining the team option on him and Corey Joseph, they would have been a second apron team. So this roster has a lot of money committed. They're going to have to shave off the edges of their roster, and I don't know if their core four is going to be good enough to ever make an NBA Finals. And it's hard to, say, well, that's the way you should grade every trade. But if you're being just realistic about this new era with the new CBA and the long-term implications of spending, I'm a little worried about Orlando, a team that historically hasn't spent a ton in their franchise's history. Then we look at some second apron teams, and I have three here that we need to talk about in the Boston Celtics, Phoenix Suns, and Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, these teams have no signing exceptions. The only way that they're able to add talent is minimum contracts. Remember, they cannot use the tax mid-level. They cannot aggregate two or more salaries together in a trade. They cannot send out cash in a trade. And they can't acquire a player using a traded player exception. So they just don't have any access to exceptions, even trade exceptions. They can only re-sign their own free agents, sign draft picks, sign players to minimum contracts, and make trades where one player is sent out and equal or less salary comes back. So if you're looking at a Durant trade for Phoenix, you need to remember, okay, well, this team can't add any salary to Durant, which is what complicates a trade to, for example, Minnesota. It becomes a very tricky situation where you're probably going to need a third team involved because of the apron status of those teams. Then you look at Cleveland. This team is way into the second apron. I expect them to look at salary dumping Max Strus this offseason in order to try and save some money. In addition to those draft picks down the road being frozen and unable to be traded, they also get pushed back to the end of the first round. So if you're looking at the long-term concerns for teams like Phoenix, Boston, and Cleveland, it's the fact that their rosters right now, some of them being very old or projecting to have some long-term shortcomings 7-8 years down the road, of course, because it's just hard to plan your team that long in the NBA. they're going to run into situations where they might be in the middle of a rebuild and they have pick 30 in the draft because of their spending in the year 2025 or 2026. And that's where you run into some real long-term issues from an organizational standpoint. And that's where some GMs and coaches and people who are going to be actively involved in the current iterations of the team that might not even be there 6-7 years from now, well, they have to have the foresight to protect the organization. And that's where an owner is extremely important, to have that control over everything going on within an organization. That's an area where Matt Ishbia has completely led the Suns astray, because he hasn't had that foresight to protect his organization while simultaneously making winning moves for the current and long-term direction for the Phoenix Suns. So a team like Boston, who at least in the short term has been winning and winning at a high level, this offseason becomes a big question for them, because they have salary in a year where Tatum's out with an Achilles injury. Are they going to dump salary for a guy like Porzingis, Drew Holiday? Could they get some solid pieces back? Could Derek White become available? And the issue is, if you do trade Derek White, how are you replacing that talent 2 years from now when Jason Tatum is fully back healthy and you're still trying to compete with him and Jaylen Brown? This is where the obstacles, the kind of push and pull, the duck and dodge of the current CBA is going to make it very, very hard to win year after year after year. Even when you have some of the best talent in the NBA, the fringes of your roster, the depth of your roster, the talent of your starting lineup is going to, over time, be diminished. We've seen it with Denver, who had to lose both Bruce Brown and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Now, I think Denver successfully hedged a lot of those moves and weren't willing to overspend for those two guys. But specifically, you're looking at deterioration of your roster over time because you're losing some players to free agency. You're unable to retain certain guys because of salary mechanisms. And I think the Celtics, Suns, and Cavs are going to be examples of that, with Max Strus getting traded, Porzingis or Holiday getting traded. And for Phoenix, they're already, facing the ramifications of being a bad team to begin with. Then you're going to dump Kevin Durant. You're going to decline the team option on Vasi Micic. You're going to try and shed salary every single which way. They gave up a pick to get off of Yusuf Nurkic's contract. The Suns have been trying to duck and weave around the second apron as much as possible, but they've just been completely stuck in it because of the Bradley Beal trade, which was, at the time they made it, an absolute idiotic trade. And I said it back then. A lot of people didn't understand why. And I think everyone's starting to see now why that deal was so disastrous for the Suns. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you guys did enjoy. This was a quick little breakdown for all 30 NBA teams, their cap space situations, what it looks like, and how it's going to affect them this offseason. Hopefully you did enjoy. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.